Hi everyone, in this video we'll look at formatting in Microsoft Excel. I'm going to open up a brand new blank workbook, and as we can see we have one worksheet within the workbook, and I'm just going to type in some numbers in cells A1 through to A3 and type in my name. I'm going to type in today's day, which is Wednesday, and finally I'll just type in the word hello. Doesn't really matter what the content is, because we're just going to look at how to apply formatting to not so much the cell content, but the cell itself. You'll see what I mean in a second. Just like in Microsoft Word, we can format the appearance of text or content in Microsoft Excel. We can change its size, its color, we can change the font, the style of the font that's being used, and we can do some other things as well. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do it. The first way is you left click once on the cell which contains the content that you want to style or format. And most of the formatting tools that we want will be on the Home tab. We have a font group on the Home tab which contains a lot of the tools that you'll want to use for formatting your font. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, you'll probably be familiar with B, I, and U, bold, italic, and underline. So let me just click once, left click once on the B for bold, and you can see the effect that it had. And to debold it or unbold it, you simply click on it again. So it's like a light switch on and off. And one thing to note is that when a cell has formatting applied, if I left click on cell A2, which has no formatting applied to it, if I go back and left click on cell A1, you can see that the B button in the font group is highlighted, which means that bold is being applied to the contents of cell A1. Let's have a look at the I beside it. That will italicize the contents of the cell, make it appear kind of leaning slightly over toward the right. And then we have an underline. Now you need to be careful when you're underlining in Excel, because the nature of Excel, it's a grid, it's a table-like structure, and sometimes the line underneath, depending on maybe what borders you're using as well, can be difficult to see. We've also got, if I left click on the down arrow, we have a double underline that we can use as well. Now, as you can see, I was talking about there with cell A1 selected, it doesn't look. It's very difficult to see the double underline, but it is actually there when you left click away from it. Notice that the U changes to a D for double underline when you have a cell, when you have formatting, underline formatting applied to a cell. I'm going to turn those three off now by left clicking on one each in turn, and that's all there is to it. Okay, that's all there is to actually doing bold, italicizing, and underlining. Now, one thing I would like to show you is that if I bold this and italicize it, and if I delete the contents of the cell and type in something else like hello, notice the way that it retains the formatting. The cell is retaining the formatting that I gave it. So I had bolded and italicized the previous contents of the cell. So that's really what you're doing. You're actually not just doing it to the contents, you're doing it to the cell itself. And the cell will actually retain or remember the formatting, so that anything I type or paste in there will have that formatting. Now I'll be showing you shortly how to clear that formatting as well. So I'll just undo and go back to the number, and I'm going to turn off all of the formatting, bolding, italicizing, and underlining. So I'm just back to my standard formatting now. The standard formatting, let's move on to the font now. The font is the name that we use to describe the style of writing. Think of it as typeface. We call it typeface in print. What typeface is that book or magazine or newspaper laid out in? Well, we use the term font to describe collectively the style of characters. Every font has a name, and the default font that's used in Microsoft Excel is known as Calibri, and we can see Calibri up here in the font group. This is called the font box. And if I left click on a down arrow, whenever you see a down arrow next to something in the ribbon toolbar, it means that there are other options, other things you can select related to that particular thing. And the down arrow is always to the right of the tool in question. So in this case, if I left click on the down arrow, I will see a list of other fonts, many other fonts, which are available on my system, and most of them should be available on your system as well. If you're using a Microsoft Windows PC, if you're using a Mac OS, you may see slightly different fonts. If you're using Linux, you might see different fonts as well. But a lot of us will have the same kind of fonts. So Arial, Arial Black, and so on and so forth. They're listed alphabetically. And a nice little touch is that when you hover your mouse before actually left clicking on the font, a nice little touch is that you can see the font changing here. It gives you a little preview of what your cell will look like if you were to change it to that font. We can also click on the scroll bar here, and I can scroll down through the list of fonts. There are a lot of fonts on the system, and in fact you can even download more. If you know the name of your font, for instance, if I wanted to go to Times New Roman, you don't need to scroll all the way down. You can actually type in the word Times, and Excel will just assume that you're talking about Times New Roman, and I can just press enter, and now my font has been changed to Times New Roman for cell A1. If I click on the other cells, you'll see that they're still Calibri. They're unaffected by it. It's only this cell. So that's all there is to changing the font. Again, you need to be careful when you're changing the font. Excel is primarily for crunching numbers. You're probably not going to have numbers displayed in very artistic fonts. Maybe you will, but a lot of workplaces obviously won't, might frown on that. They'll just want the numbers. They're not really too interested in the aesthetics. So do be careful when you're choosing a font. Make sure that it's easy to read. I'm going to go back to Calibri. So that's bold, italicizing, and underlining, and that is changing the font. Now let's look at changing the size of the font. This time I'll go down to, just because we can, we'll go down to cell A4, which contains my name, and we'll look at the size of the font. The default size in Microsoft Excel is 11 points. Okay, that's the unit of measurement that's being used. Again, we can left click on the down arrow. Remember, the down arrow gives you access to other options connected to the tool. If I left click on the down arrow, you can see that I have different sizes, all the way up to 72, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, and so on. And then it goes up in steps of 12, and then it rises up to 72, which is the maximum size that's in the list. You can also type in a number in between, like 33, and Excel is pretty good at sizing it down to that as well. The default is 11, the smallest one in the list is 8. So depending on your needs and what you're trying to do, you can select any of those numbers from the list, or you can type in a number as well. You also have these two little buttons over here, increase and decrease font size. Clicking on the increase font size, that's the large A, will make the font the next available size in the list. So as you can see, I was 11, I left clicked on the increase font size. That brought me up to 12, which is the next number on the list. If I click on the up button again, the increase button again, it brings me up to 14, which is the next button on the list. And similarly, the decrease font size button will bring you to the next smallest number in the list. So if you only want to go up one size and you know that you're at, let's say, 12 and you want it to be at 14, you don't need to actually click to get into the list and select 14. You can just click on the increase font size button, and that brings it up to 14. So it's kind of like a shortcut. It's a quick way of doing it. The last font formatting that we'll look at for this very quick section is the font color. By default, black is used. Black has the best contrast against white background, so that's why black is used. But of course, you're not limited to black. I'm going to click on cell A6, and I'm going to select, you may be familiar with this from Microsoft Word if you've ever used Word. This is the font color box. And by default, in a new worksheet and a new workbook, and just like in Word, in a new Word document, you'll see a red line under the A, so that if I left click on that, it turns the text in that cell to red. But we're not limited to just using red. Of course, we can left click on the down arrow, and we have, at the top we have automatic. The automatic color is black, so we can select that at any time to go back to black. We also have these theme colors, which are thematically connected. You can see greens, shades of green, blue, orange, and so on and so forth. And then we have a number of standard colors, the standard primary colors down here. If we're not happy with any of those, though, your computer is actually capable of displaying millions of colors, 16.7 million colors, in fact. So we can click on more colors, and we'll get the colors dialog box open. And what we can do, if we wanted to, we can click on custom, and we could choose any color that we want. Okay, here's the RGB, think of it like the rainbow, and we can change the hue of it over here by clicking and dragging, and the intensity and the brightness. If you did know the RGB value, we won't worry too much about it. You could type it in here, but don't worry too much about that. Just know that you can create a new color by left clicking on the cell that has the text that you want to change the color of, left clicking on the down arrow, selecting more colors, and then going to custom. Think of it, it's a custom color. You're creating your own custom color. And then you can click and drag around like this and click OK. Now notice when you do that, the most previously used color that you use will then appear under the A instead of red. So I don't need to go in to this down arrow and select that again. I can just left click on another cell and immediately just click on the A. and that color, the color that's underneath the A, is what will be applied to the cell that you click when you click on it. So you don't need to go in and mix your own color again. All right. Most of the time, of course, the standard colors or the theme colors are more than good enough. Be careful when you are using a color. As you can see, I'm using yellow here against white. The contrast is very, very poor. You'd need a darker background in order to make bright colors legible. So think of it, if you have a bright text, then you need a dark background. If you have a dark text or dark font color, then you need a bright background, which is why black and white works so well. All right, that's just a very quick video to show you some of the basic font formatting tools and utilities and features that are available in Microsoft Excel. In the next section, we'll do a little bit more with borders, we'll do fill colors, and I'm also going to show you the format painter as well, which is extremely useful. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.